Today's talk is going to be on the 5 paths. And I am basing it primarily on teachings that Khenpo Rinpoche gave that are in Dharma paths on page 207 to 236. And to start out with, here is a 4-line prayer that is found at the end of the Mahamudra lineage supplication. It's found many other places too, but this is the place that most of us are familiar with. Never parting from the true Guru in all my lives, may I enjoy the splendor of the Dharma, perfect the qualities of the levels and the paths, and swiftly attain the state of Vajradhara. So this talk today is on the 5 paths. These are the same paths that are mentioned in this line. Perfect the qualities of the levels and the paths. So as we practice the Dharma and we engage in listening and hearing, contemplation and practice, we gradually develop qualities. On the Bodhisattva path, the main practices are the 6 perfections, which I have been talking about also during this month, and it will continue in September. And so the path that we travel is divided into 5 paths and 10 levels. Today, I am just going to talk about the 5 paths. The 10 levels are actually part of the 3rd and the 4th paths. Now, these 5 paths are the path of accumulation, the path of unification or junction, the path of seeing or insight. The 4th path is the path of meditation or cultivation. And the last one is the path of accomplishment. And sometimes it's called the path of no learning. So to start with the first one, the path of accumulation, this is the beginning, where we start. On the other hand, in Rinpoche's book, he does say this, quote, if we are actually practicing the path of accumulation, we are quite advanced. We are not really beginners. So what he's getting at here is that it is a deep path, and there's a lot to it. And there's a lesser path, a intermediate or medium path, and then there's a greater path. And as you progress through these 3 different, you might say, levels of the path of accumulation, you've actually reached a stage of being quite advanced. Simply put, the idea of this path of accumulation is to do as many virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind as possible to accumulate as much merit as possible. These actions, these virtuous actions, increase our faith, our devotion, and our diligence. And they propel us along the path. They energize us. They increase our understanding, our realization, and our meditation. So simply put, engage in as many virtuous actions as possible. And of course, engage in as little non-virtuous action as possible. Now, to divide it up into these three levels, the lesser path of accumulation, this is what the student works on. And before I get into this, I will say that generally, this classification is classic. It goes back, it's in Gampopa's writings of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, and it probably goes back to India. But on the other hand, teachers today very seldom teach it exactly this way. The way Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche would teach is, if you want to travel the path, then meditate, take vows, if you would like, various lay vows and bodhisattva vows and so forth, and then start doing Nundro, which is a preliminary practice to begin training in Mahamudra. But so this is how this path is laid out. And it's interesting because I've been leading a book class in Love with the World by Mingyur Rinpoche, and he does talk about this first lesser path of accumulation, but does not label it as such. So with that introduction, the lesser path of accumulation is where the student works on his understanding through logic and contemplation, observation of the nature of things. And so there are 4 examinations that are done. The examinations of the body, of feelings and bodily sensations, of the mind, examining the mind and the contents of the mind. And then the 4th examination is examining objects of the mind. And this is done so that we can come to certainty about the nature of these 4 things: the body, our bodily feelings and sensations, our mind, and the external objects of the mind. So the examination of the body goes something like this. Is there anything in the body that is permanent? And you can just go through the different parts of the body. And this is more than just saying, okay, yep, that's right. Go on to the next question. It's really contemplating this, chewing on it, looking deeply. And then another examination would be, is there anything that is existing independently? Another would be, are you your body? And the conclusion is, of course, that the body is impermanent and to let go of attachment to the body. But again, you really have to contemplate this on a very deep level. And even then, it's very difficult to let go of attachment to the body. The question that Mingyur Rinpoche raises, or it's something like this: well, if I'm not my blood, who's bleeding? So the next examination is bodily sensations. And so again, to examine through asking questions like, do pleasant feelings last? Do pleasant feelings come from within or from outer objects? And I think right there, a good question to ask would be about hot peppers. Is a hot pepper a pleasant taste? And is that pleasant taste within the pepper, or is it within the person who has it in their mouth? And I can tell you from experience, there are some people that love hot peppers, and there are some people like me that will gladly give them to anybody who wants them. And if nobody wants them, I still won't eat them. So another question, which this kind of leads into, can a pleasant sensation become unpleasant? And so forth. The conclusion that you want to come to, but again, you want certainty on this, not just going, You want to know it in your heart, you might say, rather than in your head. The conclusion is that clinging to feelings cause suffering as they are impermanent. And this helps us let go of attachment to external objects, material possessions, and so forth. The next examination is mind. So now we're examining what we call consciousness. And so look at how thoughts go through your mind, both when you're meditating and in post-meditation. Observe how it seems like an endless stream of thoughts coming and going. And on top of the thoughts, there are emotions, moods, and all kinds of other mental events that go through our mind. Are they permanent? Well, if they were permanent, then all we would have to do is be happy once, and we would be happy for as long as we live. So it's important to look at the mind, look at what is happening inside our mind, and develop an understanding that it is impermanent, that there is nothing there that is permanent and independent, not influenced by other factors. And then finally, the last one is observing and analyzing the objects of mind. And looking at, for instance, our possessions, a car, and so forth. Are they permanent or are they impermanent? Why is it that sometimes we really like our car, and then when it breaks down, we don't like it so much? And you could say the same thing of people, friends and enemies, and so forth. The point being to come to the conclusion that outer objects are unreliable because they are subject to impermanence. There's not really any shelter from the uncertainty and suffering of samsara in outer objects. So Rinpoche kind of concludes this section by saying, quote, "The aim of this meditation on impermanence is to free ourselves from attachment to our physical body, to our sensations, to the existence of the mind, and the existence of all the objects of the mind." And kind of included in all of this is a conceptual examination of the non-existence of self. It's totally conceptual. In fact, this part of the path, this path of accumulation is conceptual. It's not about realization. It's about gaining a greater conceptual understanding. The medium path of accumulation is, you might say, it's described a little more simply, and it is the student works to accomplish positive qualities, develop positive qualities through virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind. And there are 4 ways of perfecting oneself on this path. The first is to purify negative karma from the past. And for those of you that have at least started Nundro, that is the second main practice of Nundro is Vajrasattva, and it's a purification practice. The second way here is to avoid repeating actions of body, speech, and mind that have accumulated the negative karma that you are trying to purify. I like to use the example of you're in a rowboat in a lake, and the boat has a hole in it, and you've got a bucket and you're bailing water. And the purification is taking that bucket and dumping water from the boat back into the lake. The second one is plugging the hole in the boat. If you don't plug the hole in the boat, you're just going to keep bailing and bailing and bailing, and probably you'll sink. So the third aspect of this path is to continue to practice positive actions that you have in the past and don't let them deteriorate. And the final one is to develop further positive qualities that you have not developed in the past. So this is actually quite simple and quite straightforward. Straightforward. And again, this is the medium path of accumulation. Now, the last path, the greater path on the path of accumulation is called the four miraculous legs. And Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche compares them to 4 wheels of a car. And it really makes a lot of sense because of the fact that we have 4 wheels on a car, and there are 4 miraculous legs, and we don't have 4 legs. And so he says, to continue the car analogy, if one wheel is missing or flat on a car, the car doesn't go anywhere. So that all four are important. We can't have one that is missing or not as strong as the other three. So he uses the phrase, the four miraculous wheels. I don't know if anybody else has used that, but Rinpoche used it, and it seems like it makes a lot of sense. So the first miraculous wheel is strong motivation and determination. With this, nothing keeps us from practice, including meditation. Nothing keeps us from engaging in virtuous actions when we are in post-meditation, when we are out of the shrine room and going through our daily lives. And the reason why this is so powerful is that we accumulate a tremendous amount of merit through practice, and that we're building very positive habitual patterns here. And that this takes us to Buddhahood. We will continue to need and depend on that strong motivation and determination to take us all the way to the completion of the path. And in fact, it just gets stronger and stronger as you travel the path. So this is extremely important. The next is diligence. And diligence is joyful exertion. It's being interested in the Dharma. And as we practice with the strong motivation and determination, joy can actually just manifest by itself, that we experience joy coming from our practice. And it can become effortless as this quality increases. And of course, this is also very important to, again, propel us towards Buddhahood. The third is mindfulness. And this is a little bit different than the mindfulness that we talk about when we are doing sitting meditation. Here, mindfulness is used in a broader meaning. It is always keeping the intention to perform virtuous actions and to avoid unwholesome actions. To do what you intended to do instead of becoming distracted and forgetting to do it. And he stresses that he comments primarily on regular practice, this being so important for regular practice. Mindfulness means that when it's time for you to go into your shrine room and practice, you don't forget to do it, or you put it off, or you make excuses, or whatever, that you actually then fulfill that commitment to practice regularly. And when we're not in the shrine room, it is being alert and aware so that we can act positively. And the fourth point here, the fourth miraculous wheel, is one-pointedness. And this is being able to sit with the mind completely focused on an object without producing any thoughts or conceptions, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, thinking about a problem that you're having, or whatever. This actually is a very advanced experience. This is the final stage of this path of accumulation, but it's a very advanced experience. And it also applies, this one-pointedness applies to mantra repetition and visualizations, that keeping your mind on the mantra and the visualizations instead of having lots of thoughts, probably neurotic thoughts. And quite honestly, he talks about how some teachers taught Americans or Westerners perhaps by having them do lots and lots of sitting meditation, because Western minds are so wild. It's so difficult to have this one-pointed concentration, and that developing it is very important before you even start doing deity practice. So these four work together. And Rinpoche finishes this segment of the book by saying, quote, if a practitioner develops all these 4 points and practices virtuous actions, the accomplishments are miraculously fast, end quote. So this is why they're called the 4 miraculous legs or the 4 miraculous wheels. So the next stage of the path is the path of unification. Sometimes it's called the path of junction, and there are probably a number of other translations for the same word. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche uses unification in Dharma paths, and Trangu Rinpoche uses junction in his commentary on the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. To start out with, these first 2 paths are ordinary because they depend on conceptuality and various experiences that prepare us for the real path or the superior path. Maybe that's a better word, the superior path. The last 3, starting with the path of seeing, depend on the experience of emptiness, and that's why they're called superior paths. Here, the path of junction is preparing us, leading us to the experience of emptiness, but it is still conceptual, just like the first path, the path of accumulation. And this experience in the last 3 paths is something that we've never had before. And since we've never had it, we really don't know what it's like. We don't have a clue, because conceptual descriptions and explanations are not the real thing and are nothing close to what it's actually like. So on this path, the path of unification, we have this junction between the path of accumulation and the path of seeing, the direct experience of emptiness. So through aspirations, devotion, and practice, we try on this path to experience emptiness, and we have other experiences as well. What we're doing is preparing ourselves for the actual experience. So we can have different experiences in meditation. Sometimes it can be clear, pleasant, stable, enjoyable. You can have moments of non-thought, bliss, physical bliss, feeling just very, very comfortable and good in your body and so forth. But these are all temporary experiences. And it is easy to cling to these experiences and think, oh, finally, I'm doing my meditation practice right. Again, the important thing to remember is that these experiences are temporary. They do not last, and we're not trying to make them last. We're letting them come and letting them go. And we also want to avoid thinking when we have these experiences, oh, I'm a really good practitioner. Things are really going well for me now. Because that solidifies things and it stops the whole progress and can actually lead you to traveling in the wrong direction. Or we might have a wild mind, an unstable mind, might have painful things happen to us or remember painful things that we have done to others or things that have happened to us. All kinds of things can come into our mind, both when we're meditating and when we're not meditating. But here we're talking primarily about meditation. You can have things come up that frighten you. Frightening memories, fear about what could happen in the future. You could even have visions of frightening things. Sadness is another thing that can come up. There's just a long list of things that can come up that we find disturbing and find that we're making a judgment that this isn't supposed to happen when I meditate, that I must be doing it wrong, that my practice is not going anywhere. So the point of this is that we are not trying to repress or suppress or eliminate these kinds of experiences when we meditate. We're just letting them arise and then letting them go without judgment. So this path of unification is working with these meditation experiences so that we can have our meditation be more beneficial to us that it can have anything arise, and then we let go of it. So whatever comes into our mind when we meditate, it's just our own mind that we are seeing. It's nothing more than that. And don't let whatever arise cause you to be discouraged. And by all means, don't start thinking prideful thoughts that I'm a great meditator, I've had this experience, or I had that experience. That's not what is happening here. So just keep remembering that and reminding yourself that these are just experiences that are occurring in my mind and that they are coming from my mind. There are two signs of progress on this path of unification. The first is the sign of purity. And this is that our negativities are reduced and we have less involvement with the afflictive states of mind. And this is pretty easy to determine if you just take inventory from time to time during the day, or especially at night when the day is ended, looking back on your day and see how you reacted to things, how much negativity you had, or afflictive emotions, and so forth. The second sign of progress is called the sign of understanding or realization. And again, this is pretty straightforward. Has your meditative concentration improved? And this is over the long run, rather than one particular session, one particularly really good session or really bad session, as you might be thinking. And again, what you think is a really bad session might actually be a very beneficial session. And what you think is a really good session might be actually a problem session because of your attitude towards it. So the point is to evaluate your meditative concentration and see how it has fared over a long period of time. And the idea is to look at it overall, kind of like the difference between climate and weather. Just because one day is a very hot day doesn't make every day a hot day. And just because one day is a cool day or a cold day, colder than way below average, that doesn't mean every day is a cold day. So be careful of that. And as we progress on this path, our faith and devotion become much greater. They were talked about in the path of accumulation. Here, they have been present, of course, from the beginning of the path. And they just keep getting greater and greater, stronger and stronger. So Rinpoche goes through 4 stages or signs on the path of unification. And these develop in the student's mind. And since they are in the student's mind, the words that they use are just relating to what's happening, but aren't exactly what is happening. So the first is warmth. And it is not that your body is getting warmer or your mind is getting warmer, but there's an increase in the five powers. Tremendous devotion, tremendous enthusiasm, a great mindfulness, one-pointed concentration, and wisdom. That these have increased. Rinpoche says the idea of warmth is it's like you rubbing two sticks together, and they get warmer, and eventually they catch fire from the heat of rubbing them together. And that's where the warmth comes from. The next is peak, or the point. And he says this means that the five powers have been stabilized, that we've now reached the highest level that we can on this path. It's the peak of our experience. The fourth stage is patience or endurance, that these five powers are now so strong and so stable that they are called the five forces. That you can bear pain and difficulties, hardships, problems. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche talks about Milarepa in this respect. That you have developed incredible endurance and patience. And then the last level here, or sign, is what's called supreme dharma. And this kind of explains why earlier peak was called peak, the highest level of our experience, because what supreme dharma means is that you've actually experienced emptiness. You've experienced Mahamudra or absolute bodhicitta. At this point, you've actually are on the path of seeing. So this is the idea of joining, that or unification or junction, that the last stage, the final stage of this path, is actually the third path, the path of insight or seeing. So this is the dividing line between conceptual understanding and experience to actual experience. And Rinpoche said, at this point, you have become a superior being, that you have completed the path of junction, and you now are on the third path, the path of seeing. So the path of seeing is the direct realization of emptiness, where I'm not talking about the third path. It is experiential. It is insight into the truth. This is non-conceptual. When you are when you have experienced emptiness, Rinpoche used the example of a man who could not speak and who tastes sugar. And the man, knows immediately that he is tasting sugar, but since he cannot speak, he can't say anything about it. So that's how this realization can be described. It's a result of great inspiration, faith, and diligence. It doesn't happen by accident. And what has occurred is that enough confusion has been removed to experience briefly the fundamental nature of mind, emptiness, no self. Rinpoche uses words like the true nature of everything, the true nature of mind, Buddha essence, and so forth. Once we have this direct experience of ourselves, of what is true, Rinpoche says that nobody can disprove it to you because you know what is true. You develop a very strong certainty that your experience was emptiness. And finally, this experience of emptiness, again, it's only fleeting. It's not stable, but it is the union of bliss and emptiness, or compassion and emptiness. The fourth path is the path of cultivation. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche uses the term, or his translator, the path of meditation. And what happens here is that you continue to cultivate the insight gained on the path of insight. You haven't reached your goal. You still have a long ways to go. You still fall under the influence of deception and illusory experiences. And this is where Mingyur Rinpoche's book, In Love with the World, is very helpful, because here you have Mingyur Rinpoche, who obviously has experienced the path of seeing, that he is a superior being. Yet in this book, he describes how he falls under the influence of deception and illusory experiences. He also then talks about what he does to work with these experiences of, you might say, backsliding. At this stage, the person still has plenty of karma to purify. So that is part of the path as well. The person on this path still engages in practice in maintaining mindfulness and continuing to study. Practicing all of the paramitas, the six transcendent virtues, are important at this stage, and devotion to the guru is extremely important. And in our case, it is the 17th Karmapa who is our guru to be devoted to. So when we join all of these things, that is automatically brings us results. The negative factors that have been plaguing our mind will eventually disappear. Quote, automatically everything that has to be understood, all the insight that one has to develop, the primordial wisdom that has to become manifest, happens naturally. And that comes from Trungpa Rinpoche's book on the jewel ornament of liberation. The last path is the path of accomplishment or no learning. And it's very simple. Why it's called this is because you have attained Buddhahood and there's no path anymore. There's nothing to travel. There's nowhere to go, nothing to be gained, nothing to remove. All your karma has been purified. All your habitual patterns are gone. And so there are two words that are used here to describe this state. One is Tathagata, and that is defined as gone to thatness. Trungpa Rinpoche says this is going to a path of what is there. Seeing the truth, the real nature of things. That since there is no ego or self, there's no fear and no worry. The other word that is frequently used to describe a Buddha is Sugata, which means gone to bliss. That while a Buddha realizes emptiness, they also have this great happiness and bliss that arises naturally as it is a quality of mind. And then finally, to end this talk, there are two kinds of awarenesses that a Buddha has. The first is awareness of exhaustion. And that is the Buddha knows everything negative that he has done. Any mistake or confusion in his mind has been exhausted. There is nothing left in his mind that is negative. The other is the awareness of non-arising. And that is, a Buddha is aware that all his faults and confusion that he has had in the past will never arise in the future, that Buddhahood is permanent. He cannot go back.